Hello, it's late afternoon, and I just love the way the sunshine comes through the window of my living room in the late afternoon. Um, I'm thinking today about an excellent book that has come out recently. It's one of these every year, and it's the UK Politics Annual Survey 2025 by Nick Gallup and David Tuck. This is specially for A-level government and politics students, so it's really helpful. And I want to just take a look through the chapters to give you an idea about what you can get out of it, particularly useful for people approaching exams, but I would say it's useful for people in their first year of A-levels as well. Don't forget to press the subscribe button, like the video, share it around, and if you need tuition, you know where I am. You can find a link on the YouTube channel or find my website. I am Dr. John Bigger, politics expert. Blimey, how did that happen? I do sometimes wonder. It's because I've been obsessed with politics for too long. That's why. That's how it happened. Right, okay. This is, I've been going through this, and I've been talking to some of the people I tutor about this book, encouraging people to get it, using the chapters as the basis for lessons and readings and all sorts of stuff. And what I like about this, particularly this year's, I think this is one of the best they've done. The chapters are always quite short, but these ones are particularly interesting set of chapters, almost like little mini essays. Each chapter contains an essay question at the end in both formats, AQA and Edexcel, and you can test yourself, and little hints on what the examiner would be looking for. And it goes through an awful lot of the specification. That's what's really helpful about it. When you are going through the specification at school or college, you will be focusing very much an awful lot on theory, of course, because you'll be focusing on how the system works. That's all theoretical. How it works in theory is different to how it works in practice. Everybody in politics is trying to get something for them or their party, something that might be ideologically fitting for them or their party. And everyone is trying to gain an advantage in some way. And sometimes the practice doesn't match the theory, and that's where good examples can come from. It's a really good chapter for this, actually. I'm thinking of a particular chapter when I'm saying this, because I've always been conscious of teaching how much power comes from getting to form a government. Keir Starmer's got that wonderful power right now. You get to choose the cabinet. You've got that power of patronage. You've got the royal prerogative powers. You get to control the agenda of Parliament. This is all good stuff. All stuff you should be able to do an awful lot with. But there's a chapter in here, chapter 9, Prime Minister and Cabinet, which is titled, Why Have Recent Prime Ministers and Their Cabinets Struggled So Much to Dictate Events and Determine Policy? And it goes through all of the Prime Ministers from David Cameron onwards and highlights their troubles. And that's made me rethink a little bit this idea of elective dictatorship, the idea that we elect a government just to get on with things. They're not very good at getting on with things, are they? From either party. They're also not particularly good, regardless of the size of their majority. And this is a recent development, really, the last 10 years. Might not sound recent to you, but for people like me, it's all recent stuff. It is, it's an interesting point, and it's kind of crept up on me, and I'm glad that I got this book to kind of help explain that to me and help me understand it better. You are always learning. Even someone like me, I did my A-levels over 30 years ago now, and I've got 2 master's degrees and a PhD in politics, and I observe politics continuously. I've worked in government, and I'm still always amazed that I'm learning stuff, but I don't mind. I mean, it's just one of those things. You can learn the facts and the figures and the way the system works, but how it happens in practice can sometimes surprise you. So it's really good, really interesting. The other thing is, of course, that you will be getting examples from a book like this. So for revision, it's great. Your textbook, of course, will give you lots of classic examples, but the textbook, like all books, this book included, is out of date the moment it's published. It's just that this is more up to date than your textbook, because that was probably published at least a year ago or more. Chapter 1 is democracy and participation, asking in the UK in 2025, is there a participation crisis? Always a possible question, isn't it? Participation crisis could crop up. Chapter 2, political parties and party systems. Is the UK finally moving to a multi-party system? There are obviously, with anything in politics, you can probably argue both sides. I've had students who are pretty categorical that we do now have a multi-party system, and I've had students who have told me no, definitely not. I fluctuate as to knowing exactly how far we can go in calling it a multi-party system. But one of the things I saw quite recently was it was a bar chart. No, not a bar chart. It was a graph, a line graph, showing the percentage share of the vote for the 3 main parties, and in grey, the percentage share of the vote for all of the others put together from 1918 to 2024. And in the last few elections, there's quite a spike for the others. And in fact, in 2024, at that election, that general election, the others were above the Conservatives. So there's an awful lot of votes going to other parties now. We've never really had that before. That's a really interesting thing to be watching out for. Chapter 3, elections and electoral systems. General election 2024. Did the weaknesses of first past the post outweigh the strengths? Interesting. Let me think about that, because I've not read that. I've not read that chapter in detail. But one of the things that is obvious is the way in which the share of the vote did not reflect the share of the seats. Labour getting a massive majority on quite a low vote share, and of course parties like Reform Reform and the Greens getting a small number of small number of seats, considering the amount of votes that they got. So that's interesting. And then there's a chapter on voting behaviour. What factors explain Labour's victory? Again, I've not looked at that yet, but I will, and that will be very interesting, because we are seeing a lot of voter volatility. I imagine that chapter will deal with some of that. Chapter 5, media influence and voting, the influence of mass media and artificial intelligence in the UK general election of 2024. Artificial intelligence getting everywhere now, not just students using it wrongly to help them with their essays. Don't do it. Do the hard work. Don't cut corners. Well, anyway, it could have some uses in the future, but I think it's untested. And you don't want to find yourself... in fact, I was talking to someone today, not in the education world, but someone who edits a magazine was telling me that someone that they paid to write an article had actually, turns out, had used AI to generate the article, which is absolutely disgraceful. Don't fall into that trap. Oh, you can't do it in your exams anyway, can you? So there we go. Chapter 6, the Constitution, the UK's Constitution in 2025, how it is changing under Labour. This is an interesting chapter because it focuses not so much on a detailed look at what Labour is doing, but how Labour's plans have changed over the last few years, because they have downgraded, watered down, whichever word you want to, or whatever phrase you want to use to describe it. The Labour government had more ambitious plans for the Constitution, which have all been watered down. I mean, the most major things I think that they are doing that they had committed to before was increasing English devolution, with mayoral elections coming up in places that hadn't had mayoral elections before. But things like House of Lords reform, their original plans were much more ambitious than simply getting rid of the hereditaries. I think it's really interesting that Labour is struggling so much on constitutional reform, and it's like history repeating itself, because on the House of Lords particularly, Tony Blair had ambitious plans, or at least his party had ambitious plans. I'm not sure that he was ever really committed to wholesale constitutional reform, but the Labour Party in the run-up to the 1997 was doing an awful lot of flirting with the Liberal Democrats in the possible event of them having a coalition in government together. Of course, the 1997 election result required no coalition, and so some of their constitutional reform package, I think, was a hangover from the fact that they thought they might need a coalition. That's my interpretation of it. You would need to do some checking on that. There's lots of interesting ideas out there about how the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Paddy Ashdown, was working really well with Tony Blair in the run-up to that election. But they seem to be having trouble with the House of Lords. Labour's problems under Tony Blair were that it started off being a quite ambitious plan to get rid of all of the hereditaries, and then they were knocked back a little bit, and so it got down to, let's just reduce it to 92, which is just a bizarre thing, really. And the same thing is happening with Keir Starmer's plan to now get rid of those 92. Knockbacks are forcing them to kind of give ground a little bit. They've got a majority in the House of Commons of about 170. Why? How is this possible? How is this possible? It links to that other chapter of how prime ministers and their cabinets struggle to dictate events and determine policy. It's very odd. Chapter 8, the UK Parliament. How well does it function? I haven't gone through that yet. My view is that we really should have quite extreme might be the wrong word, severe reforms to Parliament to ensure that the government can be held to account more. But I haven't looked at that chapter to see what they're saying yet. And then the Supreme Court, chapter 10, is the UK Supreme Court an effective guardian of rights? Again, I've not read that bit yet. I've gone through some of this more than others, as you can tell. But all of those chapters are about 10 pages each. There's little boxes with what do you need to know, kind of geared towards what the specification has to say. There's boxes with key definitions in. There's lots of different bits of information. There's often tables explaining things. And then there's a box at the end of each chapter with examination success, with sample questions and what advice the examiner's given. I think both of the authors have been examiners. It's a cracker. It's a brilliant book. Why wouldn't you get it? Why wouldn't you get it? Are you crazy? I would encourage you to get it. It's just under £10, so it's not too bad. And it will help you in your revision, or if you are not in the situation where you've got to revise for your exams yet, it will help you to keep up to date with things as you head towards the end of the year. It'll be the end of the year soon, in a matter of weeks, won't it really? It might feel a long way away now, but you also might have mocks coming up. It could help with that. All sorts of things. Okay, brilliant. Happy studying, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.